Colleen woke up to the children's screams and the noise of the game from the street. The sun was shining on the bed and it meant that it was already after 10 a.m. Her sleep was so sound that the alarm clock did not cope with its task. She stretched sweetly and immediately shuddered. Her 7-year-old son, Tom, was on his own. No one woke him up, made him breakfast, or checked if he was okay. Colleen felt exhausted, but she still found the strength to tear herself away from the bed and looked out the open window. It was a pleasant and warm Sunday morning outside the window. And somehow there are too many people on the street. Tom was already up, dressed and expending his energy on their dog Jake, a funny breed of Pembroke. Colleen breathed a sigh of relief, glanced at the unmade bed and wandered off to brush her teeth. There was no light. Colleen was not surprised. This happened periodically on hot days due to the overload of the network with massive air conditioning switches. After brushing her teeth with difficulty and hastily combing her hair, she found herself in the kitchen and for some time tried to pour into herself the nasty cool coffee from yesterday's coffee maker. No breakfast. Colleen returned to the bedroom and found the phone almost empty. There was no network. It was 11:09 on the screen. Colleen went outside and blinked against the bright sun. There was not a cloud in the blue sky. It's a great day to spend outside with your family. Tom, who was completely wet, was puzzled by Jake's attempts to bathe in a small inflatable pool, which caused a warm smile at his knees. "Hey, Colleen Jean." A young neighbor greeted her joyfully. "Good morning to you." "Good morning, Glenn. Has there been no light for a long time?" she murmured sleepily. "Since last night. When it will be unknown. And to hell with him. It's great outside. I'm thinking of starting a barbecue right here and now. If anything, join us." Colleen, once again, questioned the intentions and orientation of her neighbor and returned to the house, where yesterday's unwashed dishes were waiting for her. Suddenly, the floor shook under her feet. For a second she considered panicking, but it seemed like it was just a small jolt. "Tommy, do you want to have breakfast?" she called out loudly to her son through the open door. "No, Mom, I've already eaten," Tom shouted back. "I wonder what?" It flashed through her mind. The floor shook again. For a few moments, Colleen felt uneasy, and her hands trembled. "Calm down, girl. Everything's fine." After sorting out the dishes and having breakfast with a banana, Colleen returned to the street. All that was missing for a picture of absolute paradise was the chirping of birds, she thought. Suddenly, lights were turned on and club music started playing from somewhere deep in the street. It looks like a party can't be avoided, thought Colleen, returned to the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. A few minutes later, she came out with a mug of hot coffee and a phone and settled down on the porch. Sipping coffee, she gradually gathered her thoughts and woke up. Leaving the coffee on the porch, she walked away from Tom and dialed his father's number. "Hi, Ryan. Can you talk?" Trying to control her irritation and be friendly, she began. "Yeah, hi Colin. I'm driving. If you want, you can stop by our place." The neighbors seemed to be going to have a barbecue. Glenn was really setting up a barbecue in full, right on the lawn in front of the house. "I don't know, Colin. If I deal with... What the hell is this? Colin." Here the connection was interrupted by beeps. The lights went out again, which caused several dissatisfied exclamations all over the street. Colleen looked at the phone. There was no network. "Oh, damn it!" Colleen swore, and the ground beneath her feet shook once more. The phone suddenly turned off on its own, got hot and would have burned her hand if she hadn't dropped it. "Damn it!" Colleen stared at her reddened hand and the phone. Colleen saw her shadow on the ground. And some sudden movement. A multitude of small black spots quickly flowed across the ground in all directions. For a few seconds, the noise in the street died down. There were frightened screams and murmurs. Something soft touched her back for a second. Colleen looked up in amazement and almost fell over. A flock of crows flew at great speed in all directions, as far as the eye could see and to an unprecedented height up, right across their street. And with a deafening noise, right above their heads, 3 military aircraft cut through the flock and, leaving a plume of exhaust fumes, went over the horizon. Colleen glanced at Tom. He was fine and fearlessly watched the plane speeding away into the distance. The sky was empty again. Everyone was silent. The earth shook once more. A piercing cold wind blew. Colleen shivered. Glenn dropped the grill, turned off the gas and walked over to her with a frown. His phone was turned off in his hands. He looked into her eyes and asked, "Any idea what's going on?" Colleen shook her head. Glenn looked around, gently patted her shoulder and forced a smile. "Okay, Colleen Jean, don't worry. There is a simple and reasonable explanation for all this." Some of the people immediately disappeared into the houses. Others did not speak and looked towards the big green hills and the outskirts of the city. The anxiety was growing. "Are you all right, my boy? Aren't you scared?" Colleen came up to her son and looked anxiously at the agitated dog. "No, Mom." But Jake was scared. "What was that, Mom?" Tom asked in surprise. "I don't know, Tommy. But we'll figure it out, don't worry. There must be some kind of exercises. Why don't you go inside and calm Jake down?" Tom first shook his head negatively, then looked at the restless dog, scooped him up in his arms and dragged him home. Colleen picked up the phone and tried to turn it on. He didn't react. In the distance of the street, she saw an elderly Mr. Thompson get into his Prius, unsuccessfully pull the ignition key and quickly return to the house. A cold wind brought leaden clouds. They quickly covered the sky and hid the sun. There was a rumble somewhere in the distance. Colleen shivered and tried to revive the phone again. With difficulty, she managed to fish the battery out of the case and, after a few seconds, return it to its place. She held the power button, but the phone remained dead. Shouts and murmurs swept down the street again. Everyone was looking in the direction where the warplanes had disappeared. There, in the distance, outside the city, a thundercloud was descending on an endless green field. It covered the horizon and occasionally let fast lightning pass over its surface. A low-frequency rumble was heard. The ground vibrated under my feet. When the earth was just around the corner, the cloud released from its depths a giant cloudy gray object the size of several city blocks. The screams in the street intensified. Panic began, and Colleen just froze, couldn't move and didn't know what to do. After a few very long minutes, the object reached the ground, and Colleen's legs began to tremble violently. She came out of her stupor and began to look around. Her neighbors stared at the giant in deathly silence, some of them turned to flight. "Tom," she thought. Her muscles were like steel. She took off and quickly returned to the house. Tom was comforting Jake in the kitchen. The dog barked and darted from place to place, sweeping the floor with its lowered tail. "What is it, Mom?" Tom snapped at her, tugging at Jake's ears. "Tommy, listen to me carefully." She leaned over to her son and tried to speak in a calm voice. "Go to your room and put on your favorite blouse and sneakers. We have to go to Dad." "Is something wrong, Mom?" Tom was surprisingly calm and did not feel her panic, just looked at the frightened dog in confusion. "It's going to be okay, son. We need to see Dad, right now. Hurry up and get ready." Tom walked briskly to his room, and Colleen, trying to calm the trembling in her hands, began to pack. She rushed to the wardrobe and took out a large gym bag from its depths. Hastily, she threw warm clothes in there. In the kitchen, she took out a couple of bottles of mineral water from the refrigerator, canned food from the drawer, a knife, large matches for the gas stove, a first aid kit, a flashlight, canned dog food, all cash, including change and documents. Thinking feverishly, she stopped for a second and threw a couple of toys into her bag. When she finished, Tom was already standing in the middle of the kitchen, Jake huddled at his feet. Colleen looked at the dog. "Tommy, Jake's staying here." "It won't stay," Tom said sternly and frowned. Looking at her son, Colleen realized that she couldn't argue with him and rushed to the car. Chaos broke out on the street. With a dumbfounded look, Glenn stood on his lawn, clutching a carbine, and looked in the direction of the giant. Black, half-burnt coals scattered from his overturned barbecue onto the green grass. "Glenn, Glenn," Colleen called out to him, and Glenn started and turned around. "Leave now, Glenn, do you hear me?" Glenn looked at her, nodded, recovered a little, and rushed into the house after his husband. People ran away from the city, hastily collecting bags, putting clothes on themselves and children. It looks like no one was able to leave in their cars. Colleen ran up to her ancient 1996 Jeep, threw her bag in the trunk, put her son and dog in the back seat and rushed behind the wheel. Just get started, she whispered. Muttering prayers to either God or General Motors, she turned the key and heard the joyful tir-tir-tir of an old diesel engine. The lights on the panel were off. With force, she screwed in the gear and pressed the trigger into the floor. A familiar voice, terrified, called her name. But she didn't even think about stopping and picking up passengers. Trying not to hit people, she ran down the street. On skidding wheels, she abruptly turned out of their little paradise and slammed on the brakes. The entire roadway of the main street was occupied by abandoned cars. Terrified people were rushing in all directions. Colleen turned the steering wheel and drove down the footpath. Something hit the back door loudly, but it didn't matter at all. Colleen was trying to get to the highway from the city. Thank God it was only a few blocks away. The highway was also clogged with abandoned cars. Colleen twisted the steering wheel and threw the old SUV into a green field. A couple of minutes later, the traffic jam ended, and Colleen returned to the road. She tried not to panic, to drive carefully, to steer cars and people. "How are you, son?" She glanced at the back seat. "It's okay, Mom." "What's the mess?" Her son was curled up in his seat and hugged the dog sitting at his feet. Colleen didn't have time to answer. Ahead, on the road, she saw a Hummer parked and several soldiers bustling around it. Colleen stopped the SUV and ran out to the soldiers. I'm sorry, what's happening? Can you tell me? Where should we go?" she shouted at them. One of the soldiers, apparently the eldest, approached her. "Calm down, ma'am, we don't know. There is no connection. Go back to your house and wait for orders." "Is it just here? Where should we go?" "I do not know, ma'am. Please remain calm and return home." The ground shook under their feet. The soldier crouched slightly, ducked his head, then straightened to his full height and stared behind Colleen. "Oh shit," he said softly. Colleen turned around. Another giant was slowly descending from the sky. One of the soldiers ran up to them. "It won't start. What should the sergeant do?" he shouted in fright. "I don't know, do something and fix that damn radio." The foreman threw at him, unable to take his eyes off the giant. The earth shuddered once more as the ship touched down. The sergeant glanced gloomily at Colleen's rumbling jeep, met her gaze and lowered his eyes. "Is your jeep working?" "Ma'am, I want you to get back in the car and get out of here as soon as possible." And away. "Red, get a canister of fuel from the Hummer and give it to this woman." "Do it." "Yes, sir." The soldier quickly rushed to the car and put the canister at Colleen's feet. There was a whistle and a hum from the giant. A significant part of it sagged and shifted, revealing a shining hole from which thick bluish smoke poured out. Screams of horror were heard from somewhere in the distance. Something was coming out of the hole. It looked like a huge mushroom, only the size of a 10-story house. His skin was grayish-green, and somewhere under his hat 4 more ugly, thick appendages began, stretching all the way to the ground. The creature slowly came out, leaning on them and pulling up the central leg. It straightened up to its full height and sucked in the surrounding air noisily. There was silence for a few seconds. And then it hit them in the ears, like a locomotive whistle. Ho-ho-ho! On legs stiff from stupor, Colleen stumbled to the car, threw the canister on the passenger seat and slowly drove away from the uninvited guests. From the window she saw the second giant. That was the last straw. She stepped on the gas and didn't plan to stop again until they were safe. Tom turned his head around and looked back. Colleen was thinking about her ex-husband. More precisely, how stupid and weak he will be in this situation. Will the qualities that once made him a man worthy of Colleen's love prevail in him, or will he only save his own skin without thinking about them? Or even worse, he will save a moronic lover or he will not remember about his only child. Colleen was angry and scared. They passed Hensville, several gas stations, a suspension bridge, and moved further away from major cities. In the distance, Colleen saw flashes and heard faint pops. Finally, the military got down to business, she sighed. There, in the distance, a battle unfolded near the dam. Colleen pulled over to the side of the road and stared into the distance. The faint lights of tracer bullets cut through the gloomy sky and crashed against the Titan's body. Slowly, he turned and froze over the attacking army of insects. 2 massive appendages slowly rose into the air and blocked what was his face from the swarm of annoying bullets. From the powerful explosion of the rocket, the giant's body went like a wave. A locomotive whistle blew over the battlefield, and it meant that the Titan's patience had run out. A secondary appendage slid somewhere behind the Titan's back, extracted an incomprehensible structure and led it towards the attackers. The shooting continued for a few more seconds, but suddenly it was replaced by growing screams. People fell to the ground in convulsions, rivulets of blood appeared on their faces and necks, they gave up and froze dead in ugly poses. The attack choked and the survivors, full of horror at the angry Titans, rushed in different directions. Colleen gripped the steering wheel, was speechless, turned away from the unpleasant sight and drove off. The journey to the country house took about 5 hours. Several times Colleen stopped to rest and at least a little realize herself in what was happening. She drove slowly. The picture around changed from calm and surrounding nature to chaos, in a hurry of abandoned houses and cars. With almost no fuel left, Colleen drove along a narrow secondary road and prayed. Tom and Jake calmed down a bit and slept in the back seat. It usually took them 2 hours to get there, but now the road seemed endless to Colleen. She was afraid to make a mistake. The car carefully drove into a small village and crept along a country road through the lake shore and the forest to their house. It was quiet and deserted. Colleen parked the car, found an artificial pebble with a spare key and opened the door. There was no light. It was quiet, peaceful, and said nothing about the nightmare that was haunting them. Colleen thoughtfully shuffled around the house, went outside, looked at everything again and rescued Jake and Tom from the stuffy and dusty interior of the SUV. The dog rushed deep into the familiar house and hid somewhere in its depths and froze. Tom rubbed his eyes and face wearily with his small hands. "Are you tired, little one?" Colleen asked softly, affectionately. Her arms and legs were shaking and shaking as she took a bag of things out of the trunk. She dropped her bag on the floor, locked and chained the door. Together with Tom, they lay down on the big bed and covered themselves with a couple of blankets. Colleen stroked her son's head until he fell asleep. It was still quiet outside. Colleen looked out the window and met first twilight, and then night, and did not notice how she fell asleep. Clapping from somewhere far away snapped her out of her sleep. She looked around in fright. Tom was nowhere to be found, but after a couple of seconds he ran into the house. "Look, Mom, fireworks!" he shouted joyfully. Colleen went outside. Somewhere in the distance, on the very edge of the horizon, bright blue and orange flashes flashed, muffled pops were heard. This went on for about 20 minutes. Then everything went quiet. Their silent candlelit dinner consisted of canned beans and a can of pineapples found in kitchen cupboards. Suddenly the light came on. Colleen stared at the burning light bulbs in surprise. "Is it really over?" she blurted out. Out of the corner of her ear, she heard a crackle and a whistle, and there was a smell of burning in the air. The light bulbs lit up brightly, then even brighter and even more. Before they all took off, Colleen managed to rush forward and dragged him under the table. Jake screamed and ran away, somewhere deep into the house. Total darkness reigned over the human world. Thus came the end of the era of man. Day 124. For the first 2 weeks after the end of the world, they lived relatively well. It didn't occur to anyone to hide here. Colleen went through all the houses in the area. She managed to find canned food, cereals, candles, matches and other supplies in almost every house. The fresh lake was clean, the water was suitable. Colleen was thinking about getting some gear and starting fishing. But I had no idea how. At that time, she had not yet come up with the idea to look for this information in books. By day 41, their supplies were almost gone. The car refused to start and showed no signs of life. Colleen wandered thoughtfully through the ruined village and did not know what to do next. In the evening, she scooped up the remains of canned food in a large backpack and decided to walk towards Atlanta. In the morning it was very quiet, there were no animals or birds in sight. They walked slowly along the road. The days have become hotter and stuffier, and the nights are cold. During the day, it became somehow unpleasant to breathe. There was a strange sweet smell in the air. The wind brought suffocating pollen from afar. After 6 hours, they reached the gas station. Colleen breathed a sigh of relief, but about 30 meters before her, she noticed the twisted body of a man lying on his back in a small ravine. Colleen carefully avoided the unpleasant picture, trying not to let Tom see it, and left him outside to keep an eye on Jake. The interior of the mini-market smelled of decay and death. "I think there were more bodies here." Grimacing, Colleen opened the refrigerator, which had not been working for a long time, and took out 2 bottles of water and a bottle of soda. Sugar won't hurt. On the shelves she found chips and crackers that were supposed to be preserved. Outside, Tom was examining a strange plant with sharp leaves. It was very striking in its bluish coloring, size and sharp difference from the unkempt grass. "Don't touch that, Tom," Colleen called out to him. "I didn't even think about it, Mom. Just wondering." Day 184. I'm Jeremy. Take it easy. I'm not going to hurt you. Do you have any food? I know where to get it. Colleen held an intelligent and shabby man of about 45 at gunpoint. He was wearing glasses, kept calm, did not make sudden movements and maintained his dignity. Colleen was nervous. They found a nice unlocked house and didn't expect any guests at all. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I'm not a danger to you. I saw a light in the window, decided to see what was what, and saw a woman with a child. Maybe we live in a strange time, but I couldn't pass by and not ask if everything was all right." Colleen hesitated a little longer and lowered her weapon. Jeremy sighed with visible relief, but did not lower his hands. "You see, I'm not armed." He slowly turned around on his axis. Colleen exhaled too, calmed the trembling in her hands and waved the gun at the stranger, inviting him into the house. The stranger obediently came in, sat down on a chair, took off his backpack, put it on his knees and wrapped his arms around it. There was no threat in his movements or eyes, but Colleen couldn't relax even if she wanted to. "As I said, ma'am, my name is Jeremy. I am a local resident. You've taken over the Gross house, but I don't think they'd mind. They left about 3 months ago." Jake crept up to Jeremy's feet, funny ears tucked in, sniffed at him and hid under the table. "Oh doggy," Jeremy beamed. "This is Corgi, if I'm not mistaken, a good friend for your son. It wasn't easy for you. I taught history at a local school." "Oh, I'm sorry, I think I'm talking too much. It's a bad habit. Unfortunately, there are not many interlocutors here. I'm Colin, my son's name is Tom, and this is Jake." Colin took up a defensive position a meter from the table, leaning against the kitchen set. "Well, Colin, let's get to know each other. Are you alone?" The candle flame caught Jeremy's face. "Yes. To some extent, I was lucky. I am alone and have already experienced the loss of all my loved ones. To be honest, the only meaning of life for me is interest. I've been studying history all my life and now I'm just living in an incredible era and I can observe it with my own eyes." "I'm sorry." "Yes, it's okay. I'm used to. How did you survive, Jeremy?" "I think so do you." He did not panic and acted cautiously. "Apparently, what happened here happened everywhere. Therefore, I was in no hurry to leave the house. There was everything you needed around. The military tried to evacuate us, but, as I understood it, they had neither command nor communication. And I didn't want to go to the camp and depend on someone. I have my own head on my shoulders. I know too much about the nature of people and what happens in camps." Colleen put the gun away and shared dinner with her new neighbor. "When do you think it will end?" "What is it?" she asked. "Will it end?" "I don't think it can end. This is just the beginning." "So our planet has been invaded? Why this attack? I thought the aliens, if they come, they won't be like us." "I disagree with you, Colin. It is wrong to call what is happening a seizure. Nothing to do with the conquistadors, for example. The aliens, it seemed to me, are quite peaceful farmers. It's just that their farm is being built on the territory where our anthill was." "An anthill? So what are we, ants?" Colleen scoffed, but Jeremy was serious. "It turns out that way." "And what should we do about it?" Well, the same thing that the ants did. To adapt. Civilization has no meaning for our species. Once it was not there, then it was, and now it is not there again. We lived like animals in nature, then took the subway to work. Now there is no subway. But you and I are alive, and your son will be alive, and then your son's son, and so on. We'll manage somehow. You obviously didn't think that the world could take off like this and collapse overnight. And I've always known this, but I didn't think I'd see this moment with my own eyes. We are not the crown of evolution. Just a slightly luckier branch than the Neanderthals or the idyll. In parallel, our branch developed 10 more pieces, and maybe more human species. And they're all lying in the ground. And the same fate awaits us. It was always inevitable, that's nature. Do you think we will be exterminated? Exterminate? No, I don't think so. There is no war or genocide going on. Obviously, they don't consider us an intelligent life form. As we don't count, for example, dolphins or elephants. Although, as far as I know, there is little difference in our behavior. We are a little more advanced and have managed to master the technology. But dolphins don't take out lifetime mortgages and don't kill each other in endless wars. Colleen was stunned into silence. Until that moment she had not thought at all about anything except the survival of herself and her son. "I can't help but ask. How's Tom?" "Internally. I think he's fine. An amazing boy. Almost a man. Well, the future of our world is in the hands of people like him. The world will change, now not under our influence and control and who knows how. When people migrated from continent to continent, they took their crops and animals with them. I wonder what the new owners have brought with them and how it will affect our planet and us." "I want to show you something, Colin." Jeremy hid behind a tree and motioned her over. "What is it?" Colleen was surprised. At the place where they were standing, the forest ended, and as far as the eye could see, there was a huge and flat field planted with some plants similar in shape to pineapples, only exceeding human height. "I've been watching this case for the 3rd month now. They're growing damn fast, I'll tell you. It looks like a vegetable garden, doesn't it? Since I have nothing much to lose, a couple of weeks ago I tried one of these, fruits and they are very good. Divine, I would even say. As I said before, our invaders are not invaders at all, but quite peaceful farmers. And where are the owners? And I have never seen the owners. They don't seem to be worried about their crops at all. And I understand why. Animals and birds do not touch it, and insects cannot get through the thick peel. Shall we take a closer look?" Colleen hesitated a bit and followed Jeremy out of the woods. Up close, the resemblance to a pineapple was lost. The fruit was huge, cylindrical in shape, its upper part sticking out of the ground by 2 meters. The peel was a cross between a beetroot and some kind of exotic fruit. The ground on the field looked dehydrated and withered, and the grass around it did not grow at all. Jeremy was clearly not going to leave empty-handed. His eyes were burning. "Well, will you help me, Colin?" Colleen shivered. She didn't like what was happening and the fact that they left Tom alone, strictly forbidding him to leave the house and open the door and windows. Colleen walked up to the huge fruit, stood with her feet on the part of it sticking out of the ground, took a knife with both hands, pointed the blade down and struck. The knife stuck in a maximum of a centimeter. The skin of the fetus was quite rough. But she gave in. For about 10 minutes, Colin and Jeremy cut through to the pulp. A thick colorless juice with a pungent and rich odor flowed from the fruit. Beneath the rough skin was a delicate, jelly-like cloth of a murky dark blue color. Colleen cut off a very small piece, examined it carefully, sniffed it, thought for a while and threw it into her mouth. The taste was incomparable. It seemed to envelop the sky and was so thick and bright that for a few seconds it interrupted all other feelings. Colleen came to her senses and turned around several times. Everything was quiet. Enthusiastically, she began to work with a knife and stuff the bags with pulp. After about 20 minutes, their bags were full of sweet mass. On the way back, Jeremy was smiling and in great spirits. "Oh, and what's this?" Jeremy suddenly stopped and pointed to the far edge of the field, peeking out of the woods. Somewhere in the center of the garden, low walls rose from a strange dark blue material, weaving into a strange pattern of a maze flowing between the beds. The pattern looked unfinished. "Shall we take a closer look?" Jeremy nodded. "I'll pass. Enough adventures for today." "Okay, next time," Jeremy sighed. After Colleen tasted the unfamiliar fruit, it had already been 5 hours. She felt great, much more cheerful than usual. "I didn't feel like eating or drinking at all." Colleen examined herself carefully. There were no signs of allergies. She listened to her feelings. Everything was fine. In the evening, she risked eating a couple more pieces. There was still a side effect. "I didn't feel like sleeping at all." Colleen felt like she could run all night. It was hardly some kind of narcotic effect. By candlelight, Colleen examined her pupils. They were not dilated. Her heart was working as usual, and maybe even better. Everything was fine in the morning, and only by the next evening the magical effect of the fruit began to subside. Jeremy was inspired and wanted to eat only what they had gathered. It looks like he was high. But Colleen decided not to take any chances. It is not known how such a diet will affect in the long term. Everything was too good. Colleen decided that it was worth conducting a few more experiments and occasionally eating the fruit. It was stored for a long time. 3 days later, its taste, color and consistency remained the same as at the time of collection. Only moisture had the property of drying out. Colleen had already seen something similar with her grandmother when she was growing aloe. That was good news. The canned food will run out someday. But now an endless source of food was at their fingertips. 5 times they went to the field and harvested. Colleen even became interested. Most likely, there are other crops that are grown by aliens. All this time, Jeremy was experimenting on himself. And apparently successful. Every day he wrote down his feelings in a small notebook. Jeremy didn't go crazy, he didn't break down, he didn't lose weight, he didn't have any signs of allergies. On the contrary, he looked much stronger and more cheerful than at the time of their acquaintance. The 6th trip for a treat ended in tragedy. Everything was going as usual. Only this time they went after dark, leaving Tom sleeping soundly in an embrace with the dog. The strange maze had grown and was now visible all over the field. Colleen was wielding an axe, and Jeremy was exploring the area. He moved away from Colleen by only 10 meters, and quietly carried his abstruse nonsense. Suddenly he stopped dead in his tracks, his feet left the ground, he froze in the air and screamed. For a while, Jeremy dangled in the air like a toy, but then there was a strange electric sound, a bright blue flash passed through Jeremy, the space around him curled into petals and tore him apart. Blood under pressure splattered all around in small drops, including Colleen. She shuddered, and ran through the forest with all her might. To her right, an electric glow was breaking through the foliage. In the distance, an inhuman howl was heard, full of horror and pain. In the electric flashes, Colleen saw a large and inhuman body crowned with horns. It looked like it was a deer that was also giving up the ghost, having fallen into a bizarre and terrible trap. With great difficulty, Colleen got home and looked around nervously. She had to throw away her clothes and wash off the blood. The first rays of the sun caught her doing this. Colleen went outside to take a break and froze. The whole ground near their house was trampled with small 3-toed footprints. It was time to move on. Day 256. Colleen didn't have the strength to move. She felt so bad that she started to lose time. 2 weeks ago, first she and then Jake showed symptoms of fever. Suddenly, she was thrown into a fever, her legs became wobbly, and after half an hour she could no longer stand confidently on her feet. Tom was very worried and didn't know what to do, just brought her water. The first outbreak lasted a day and a half, then the fever subsided slightly. There was an ache all over the body, a severe runny nose and a terrible uterine cough. During it, a creepy-looking liquid green-yellow mucus came out of her mouth. As soon as Colleen could stand, they broke into the nearest pharmacy. Colleen took a shock dose of tetracycline and waited. She was scared. She couldn't leave Tom alone in this world. On the fourth day, Tom also fell ill. His symptoms were the same. Colleen drank all the antibiotics she could find and a day later, after checking the effect, gave them to Tom. On the 8th day, her health improved slightly. The cough became more rare, but sank somewhere deep into her chest, and every gust of it was accompanied by a strong tearing pain somewhere inside. It wasn't good at all. And she couldn't sleep. Tom behaved like a man. He brought her water and medicine, covered her with a blanket and even tried to guard them at night. Colleen couldn't believe she'd been able to raise so many amazing people. Luck did not leave them here either. Either poorly taken medications or their southern strong genes were able to overcome the disease. Their new home was once a huge shopping mall. As Jeremy said, the world is going to change. To Colleen's horror, this was indeed the case. In the very center of the shopping center, where once there was a huge alley with benches and a fountain, a giant plant has taken its thick roots. Every day, it grew more and more, enveloping the walls in a cage of dirty green vines. For them, the giant was not dangerous, and Colleen did not think about leaving the mall yet. There were too many useful things in it. They were huddled in a large department with tourist goods on the second floor. Right there they set up several large tents, made barricades and brought in a large amount of food and water supplies from the supermarket on the ground floor. The illness let them go and Colleen had time to think about what to do next. She studied the maps and books from the book department, hoping to figure out where to go to be safe. Tom and Jake were delighted with their new home. They had a huge amount of space and a lot of tools for games. And at some point they relaxed. Colleen was walking around the second floor when she heard Tom's high-pitched scream and their dog's broken bark. She rushed down the stairs, trying to get her gun out of its holster. Tom stood in the middle of the alley surrounded by three strange creatures the size of a large dog. Their skin was black and very grooved, their legs ugly and thin, their muzzles short and extending into their shoulders. The creatures walked warily around Tom, sniffing and making cracking noises. Jake stood at the boys' feet and barked frantically, trying to drive them away. "Let's go away." The creatures," Colleen screamed, pointed the gun at them and hit the trigger. The gun made a distinctive click, then another and another. "Oh my God, I forgot to charge it," Colleen realized in horror. The creatures didn't take their eyes off her. Finally, they made their choice and rushed at Tom. Colleen screamed. And Tom, as quickly as he could, lay down on the ground and covered his head with his hands. The animals ran up to him, stopped a step away and began to sniff at him. One of the animals grabbed Tom by the boot and began to torment him. Tom lay motionless and made no sound. Jake lunged at the nearest creature and grabbed its leg. The creature creaked creakily, dropped its prey and hunched over towards Jake. The dog backed away and rushed to the exit. The creature gave chase. Tom just lay there without making a sound. Colleen picked up a stone from the ground and threw it. Then another and another. One of the stones hit one of the creatures in the face with such force that it sagged, made a restless crack and flew out. It was followed by a second one. "Are you okay, Tom?" Colleen rushed to her son. Holding back tears with difficulty and clenching his fists, Tom got to his feet. Colleen grabbed her son in her arms and rushed upstairs. Upstairs, she carefully examined her son's leg, found several lacerations and began to treat them. Tom was scared. Mom, where's Jake? Mom?" Colleen couldn't answer her, tried to bandage her son as soon as possible and feverishly remembered where they had put the boxes of cartridges. Suddenly she heard a noise. Something fell loudly on the ground floor. Colleen listened. There was a patter of paws. Colleen motioned for her son to be silent and froze, trying not to make a sound. A crackling sound was heard from below. It began to grow and resonated. Soon it became so loud that it began to press on the ears. The creatures have returned, with their whole pack. Colleen pressed herself into her son, covering his ears. And suddenly everything stopped. The crackling was interrupted by a dull and powerful blow. There was silence for a second, and it exploded with a crackle of different frequencies and a terrible roar. The building shook, the windows rang and began to crumble. A crack began to flow down the wall of their department. There was only one way out. Colleen yanked Tom off the floor and rushed to the door. Colleen was scared, but she had no choice. "We need to break through." Taking Tom in his arms, Colin rushed forward, successfully passed the door, descended the stairs and suddenly froze. The peacefully sleeping plant, which they had always considered an element of the interior, woke up. All the creatures that were on the ground floor, and there were dozens of them, were wrapped in his tentacles and broken. The plant was dragging them into its mouth. Some were still alive and chattering plaintively. The vine on the handrail moved and slid over Colleen's arm. Colleen froze, but Liana just jumped aside, as if she thought she was something inedible. Colin and Tom returned to their department, sat on the floor and waited for the sounds to subside. A couple of hours later, they ventured out. The mall was torn to shreds. The dog was nowhere to be found. Colleen exhaled and began to pack her things. It was dangerous to stay here. It's time to move on. When they were leaving, Colin gently patted the plant on a thick vine. Thank you, friend, and goodbye. They had been walking for 3 days and Colleen was getting more and more depressed. Roads, cities and all signs of the human world were erased from reality. In their place, strange and seemingly dangerous plants were now growing. They hardly saw any animals or birds, apparently they all either died or fled. And Colleen was afraid that soon the new world would swallow them up too. Several times they heard a crackling in the distance and once they saw a lone crackler in the distance, which fortunately did not pay attention to them. The air was getting hotter and the air became thick and humid. Colleen took a large travel backpack with her, and as much supplies as she could carry. But they are unlikely to last long. Colleen didn't know what to do or where to go. So they just went ahead. Tom was sad and missed Jake. His search led to nothing, and it was not a safe idea to wander through the forest. Their brave dog and her son's only friend is most likely dead. On their long journey, there came a moment when Colleen began to give all the supplies to Tom. It has become more difficult to find food. They had no other options. We'll have to get some fruits to survive. For 2 days, Colleen pondered this dangerous idea until she saw a familiar field in the distance. Colleen looked at her son and made a decision. Cautiously, she walked around the edge of the field, looking for a pattern. They walked along the edge of the forest for several kilometers before Colleen made sure that there was nothing like what she and Jeremy had seen in the fields. She came out of the forest, carefully approached the nearest fruit and plunged a knife into it. She managed to stuff the bags and carefully went back the same way. But she was unlucky. Her foot caught on an old dead weed. Colleen stumbled, took a step to the side and immediately came back. But it was too late. Her calves, thighs and back turned to lead and she was in the air, kicking her arms and legs helplessly. Tom was staring at her from the bushes, scared. Don't look, Tommy. Don't look, do you hear? Turn around and leave, come on. I love you. She shouted, looked at her son one last time and squeezed her eyes shut. Ho, oh, oh, oh. She suddenly heard a soft and velvety sound. Something wrapped around her body and gently lowered her to the ground. Colleen froze and prayed that her Tom was already far away. Get up, Mom, get up, her son called softly. Colleen trembled, looked into the bushes at her son and up. A giant towered over her. His ugly tentacle was half a meter away from Colleen. From under the visor of a fancy cap, a bed of black eyes stared at her. Oh, 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 oh. The giant boomed softly and gently pushed Colleen's appendage towards the forest. On stiff legs, Colleen took a few steps, hugged Tom tightly to her and turned on the giant. Ho, oh, oh. With a different intonation, the giant stretched out and went his way. We'll learn how to hunt, Tom. And stay away from their gardens, Colleen whispered, looking after the kind giant. It's okay, Mom, we'll make it work. We are a great team. Tom squeezed her hand. Colleen looked into the depths of the forest, took her son's hand and stepped into a new world. A familiar bark came from the bushes. Tommy broke free from her arms and ran into the woods. Jake, he shouted joyfully.